Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to cover some fundamental terms and concepts that will be useful to your study of writing, to composition, to rhetoric, to thinking about language and how you use language to accomplish something, right? So, going to start at the most basic, looking at the study of language, which is called linguistics. And a more sort of formal definition of linguistics, this is from Merriam-Webster. It's the study of human speech, including the units, nature, structure, and modification of language. Note that it's the study of human speech, emphasis on speech. When we're talking about language and really understanding language and how language functions, we want to start with spoken language. To give you an idea of why this is, think about this. There are roughly between 6,000 and 7,000 languages in the world today, all across the world. Many of these languages are endangered, they're threatened to no longer exist because of a variety of reasons, some environmental reasons. And of those 6,000 to 7,000 languages in the world today, somewhere between 200 and 300 have a written form. So, language in its somewhat natural state, right, is spoken. So that's why linguistics is the study of human speech. Now, then, what is language? So, here again from Merriam-Webster, language is the words, their pronunciation, and the methods of combining them used and understood by a community. So a group of words and how those words are used that is understood and recognized by a community. Now, what then falls under a language? How does one separate what is a language from what's a dialect? What's the difference between a language and a pidgin and a creole? We'll get into this later on, but one joke linguists like to say is that a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. That's something to consider. We'll come back to this idea later on. So, we have a language. How do we categorize or how do we group languages together to understand more about them, to understand their similarities and differences? A group of languages that's derived from a single ancestral language is called a language family. And that ancestral language is called the proto-language. So, English, the language we're speaking here, that belongs to the Proto-Indo-European language family, along with most, but not all, European languages, Slavic languages like Russian, and some Persian languages like Kurdish and Hindi. All these derive from Proto-Indo-European. A European language that does not belong to this family is Estonian. My family on my mother's side comes from Estonia. Estonia is a small country in the Baltics. It's next to Russia. It was one of the countries that was occupied by the Soviet Union. And its language family is the Uralic language family. Estonian and Finnish, right? So not every European language belongs there, but most fall under that category. You might be familiar with the Romance languages or Latin languages, languages that are derived from Latin, right? Those are French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and Romanian. English is not a Latin language. It does have many words that are borrowed from Latin, and many words that are borrowed from the Romance languages, especially French. A large number of words come from French in English because of the Norman conquest. But English rather falls under the Germanic language family. Can trace back to Proto-Germanic, and then that traces back to Proto-Indo-European. Other Germanic languages include German, naturally, Dutch, Danish, Swedish, Afrikaans, language spoken in South Africa, similar to Dutch, Yiddish, Norwegian. All of these are Germanic languages. They are similar and they're derived from a parent language. We can call them daughter languages, in fact. And understanding this group of language helps us to understand something about the structure of the language, some things about how the grammar functions in the language. Okay, so we've got the study of language. We know what a language is. We can categorize a language, put it into a certain family. And we know that a language is the group of words used by a community. So then what is a word? So here again from Merriam-Webster, a word is a speech sound or series of speech sounds that symbolizes and communicates a meaning, usually without being divisible into smaller units capable of independent use. It's a sound or group of sounds that expresses a single idea and is recognizable by that single idea, by that sound that's made. Okay, how do we make those sounds? So we have vowel sounds and we have consonant sounds. A unit of sound that includes a vowel sound is called a syllable. Syllables have one single vowel sound, and words in English can have a single syllable or multiple syllables. Now, how do we categorize words? How do we group different kinds of words together? You might be familiar with the 8 parts of speech. That might be something you talked about in middle school, maybe a little in high school. Generally, that's covered at some point in primary education, but it might not have been. So 8 parts of speech. Now that you're in college, we're going to use a fancier academic term, which is lexical categories. Lexical, right, is the adjectival version of the word lexicon, right? Lexical refers to words. So lexical category, group of words. The 8 parts of speech are included there. There are 8 lexical categories. And then there are a couple others that you might not be familiar with that might not have been included when you initially studied or talked about parts of speech. But every word falls under some lexical category. So words that aren't going to fit those 8, right, have to belong somewhere. So what are these lexical categories? We'll go through them fairly quickly here, and then later on I can get into more detail about the specifics for each one. So, lexical categories. First one I'll talk about is a noun. A noun, right, can serve as the subject of a sentence, and that's part of how we determine what lexical category a word falls into, where the word can be in the sentence, what function it can serve in the sentence. So nouns can serve as the subject of a sentence. They can also be an object, and nouns generally express people, places, things, abstract ideas, emotions, variety of things that can serve as the subject of a sentence. Then you get verbs. A verb can express what the subject is, has, does, or feels. You can break a verb up into a couple categories. You have action verbs, you can have state of being verbs or linking verbs, you can have helping verbs that are used to assist a main verb to allow it to function differently in a sentence. So those are verbs. Another lexical category is a pronoun. A pronoun can be used to take the place of a noun in a sentence. Two lexical categories that are modifiers are adjectives and adverbs. Adjectives modify nouns and pronouns in a sentence. Adverbs modify adjectives or verbs or other adverbs. Adverbs are sometimes called the trash category. Everything is thrown in there. They can express degree, they express time. Lots of different things are expressed with an adverb because of that function of modifying a verb or an adjective or another adverb. Next is an interjection, right? An interjection is a word that shows strong emotion. It's used to be placed into a sentence to show that strong emotion suddenly coming out, right? Swear words are often interjections. They're often followed by an exclamation point, but if it's not as strong of an interjected emotion, then you would use a comma, right? And we would use an adverb to express that degree of strength of emotion. You have prepositions. Prepositions, right, we're sometimes taught to think of prepositions showing relationships, right? Words like in, by, at, near, and you can think of them in that way, sort of relational words. Conjunctions are used to combine ideas in a sentence. Ideas either of the same weight or an idea of, and you would use a coordinating conjunction for that, or an idea with lesser weight combined to an idea of greater weight within the sentence. You'd have a subordinating conjunction to begin the lesser idea. So those are the 8 that you might be familiar with. You might have heard these other 2 as well, because what is a word like or huh or lol? Where does that fall under? These are called discourse markers. And discourse markers are used in speech, in discourse, to denote certain ideas, to sort of punctuate things that you're saying. That's a discourse marker. And you're familiar with a word like but you might not have thought about what category it falls under before. So, we've placed words into categories. Now let's start to do things with those words. Let's start to group them together. And when you take a group of words together and they function to accomplish something within a sentence, that's called a phrase. You can have a noun phrase where the group of words is functioning as a noun. Often it'll be the noun accompanied by adjectives. You can have a verb phrase, right? That's where you have the verb and it's helping verbs maybe. You've probably heard of a prepositional phrase, right? The preposition and its object functioning together. So, we have words, we have a group of words, that's a phrase. Now, what if we have a group of words, and within that group of words, there's a subject, which is who or what the group of words is about, and a predicate, which is what that subject is, has, does, or feels. Then you would have a clause. A clause can be a sentence on its own if it is an independent clause. And a sentence can also be made up of more than one independent clause that you combine with a coordinating conjunction, comma, and a coordinating conjunction, or a semicolon between the two independent clauses. If you use a semicolon, you want those two clauses to be directly related to one another, the relationship between them to be clear. You can also have a group of words with a subject and a predicate, but it doesn't express a complete thought. And that's a subordinating clause, a subordinate clause. For example, an independent clause would be, he walks to the store. We have a subject, we have a predicate, and we have a complete thought. We know what the subject is doing, and that's that. If we put a subordinating conjunction in front of that, when he walks to the store, that is a group of words, it has a subject, and it has a predicate, but we no longer have a complete idea what happens when he walks to the store. You need to attach that subordinate clause to an independent clause. All right. So a sentence then is an independent clause, or more than one independent clause, group of words with a subject and a predicate, and it expresses a complete thought. The other things you need to make a sentence needs to begin with a capital letter and end with end punctuation and end marker. Of course, there are exceptions to all of these rules, really. But for understanding a sentence, begin with a capital letter, end with an end marker, and we can use that end marker to help us determine a few different kinds of sentences. Again, this is something you might have covered before in middle school or high school or elementary school even. Different kinds of sentences. You have a declarative sentence, which ends with a period, and it makes a statement. You have an interrogative sentence, which asks a question. It ends with a question mark. When we're speaking, we can often raise our voice at the end of a sentence to suggest that it is a question. So you could take "you go to the store" to "you go to the store," and we now know that it's interrogative. An imperative sentence makes a command. It will also end with a period, could also end with an exclamation point. And in an imperative sentence, the subject will often be implied. So, go to the store. Looking at the sentence, at the words in the sentence, there's no noun serving as a subject there, but it's the implied you or the person that you're speaking to, so it is a complete sentence. It does express a complete thought. And then exclamatory sentences, right? These show extreme emotion, and they end with an exclamation point. Okay. There you have it. Going to stop there for now. We've got then the study of language, what a language is. It's composed of words. We know what words are. We know how to categorize those words. We know what then happens when words are grouped together. What's happened when a group of words has a subject and a predicate. And then what happens when a group of words has a subject and a predicate and it expresses a complete thought. It's useful to remind yourself of some of this, or to learn these terms, revisit some of these terms for some of you, so that when you get into drafting your essays, and you find that a sentence that you're writing isn't working for some reason, or you write a sentence and then you read it out loud and it doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't seem to work, You can use some of these terms to help you to understand what's off about that sentence. You can use these terms to help craft sentences that are effective, to lead to writing that is effective and meaningful, and writing that will impact the readers in the way that you want it to. So these are some of these fundamentals that will be useful in the study of composition and of rhetoric and writing, and we will go from there.